So before we get to Charlie, let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
President Putin is open for peace negotiations without any preconditions. And this is what he was proposing for the last couple of weeks.
Massive news overseas
that we are ready for negotiations.
Massive news overseas. One-on-one ceasefire talks are set to take place Thursday. Putin and Zelensky. Do you believe it? We'll see. It was Putin who called it, and it was Trump and Zelensky who may have called this bluff.
Number 2.
Look, a lot of Democrats are not happy that he's reemerging as the party's trying to find its way. There's still lingering frustration with how he handled 2024. He's going to go out there and defend himself and defend his record.
Yep, Dems agree. Joe's comeback is as bad as possible, and left thrash their way through a post-election malaise while they go after people who express moderate views. Go figure.
Number 1.
We come to agreement that our reciprocal tariff rate will go down to 10% on the United States side, so it goes down 115%. We enter into a 90-day pause period for negotiations.
So there you go. That was our trade representative talking about the big news. U.S. and China have framed out a deal in Switzerland after 2 intense days of talks. They have set up a mechanism to go over all disputes and to continue to iron out the details. We don't have a lot, but we know it's going to be 30% tariffs for China, with 20% because they can't control fentanyl or she refused to, and then 10% on U.S. goods. What does that mean for supply chain? What does it mean for our shelves and prices? Let's bring in Charles Gasparino. Charles, bring us behind the scenes. Why do you think they made so much progress in 2 days?
Mutually assured destruction. That's the best way to put it. Their economy needs us. Our economy needs them. None of this was good for either side. I mean, listen, we sit around and we pick on globalists all the time, and globalism as a bad thing. A lot of our viewers echo those remarks. I'm certainly a critic of globalism, but in this case, it kind of worked, and here's why. Because of globalism, because of this sort of mutual need for each other, we're able to cut a deal here. That's one reason why we're probably not going to go to war with China, because our economies are interlinked, whether it's good or bad. No doubt that they got the better end of the stick for a while, and that's sort of changing, and Trump's doing a good job of, trying to change that. But we're linked, and here's kind of why we needed to cave on this as well. Those containers were coming back empty from overseas, from China. Small businesses, which are like one of the key components of the MAGA coalition, the small businessman, small businesswoman, was about to get crushed. They source a lot of their products even when they manufacture them here. I mean, I know a lot of people. I know someone, for example, that does baby strollers and carriages and stuff like that. Those certain parts, whether we like it or not, they're not made here. I mean, it's going to take years to create those plants. All that stuff was either coming back empty, you're not getting them, or they were coming back with massive price increases, which made it untenable. Right. Those businesses were going to go out of business. I mean, a lot of them were talking that.
You say nobody. You say both sides blinked.
Yeah, I mean, they need us too. They need our export. They need to export stuff to us. There's no doubt. They have an export-driven economy. It's depending on who you speak to on this, it's either in a great recession or at least a slowdown. They have a lot of poverty still. That's part of their, this whole thing about, what do they call it, the Belt and Road thing, whatever it was called.
Yes.
That whole thing was to eliminate poverty. China still has a poverty problem. So, and they have a middle class, and and people are getting restless with the economy there. So they needed us. So when you have two sides that need each other, compromise can come. Now, the question is, this is a pause, right? Everything kind of is normalized to a certain extent for the next 90 days. We have to see exactly what the fine print says at the end. But it's kind of a good thing if you believe in some degree of free trade, because things, it's a better deal for us. It's a better deal for them.
Right.
And two sides are talking. But it does speak to the notion that globalism does work. I mean, there's something about this where we all need each other. The chances of us going to war and trying to kill each other are less.
So I think
that's the way it was supposed to. That's the way it was supposed to work. Now we just didn't exert a strong enough hand over the years. We just kind of let them run amok, and those days are over. Obviously, with Trump.
Well, I mean, phase one of the deal, people want to be critical of it. How can you be critical? Before they even signed it, we hit it with the pandemic, and Biden didn't enforce it. So now it's about enforcement, and it also is about us waking up and understanding we can't depend on our magnets and our metals from China ever. I don't care how cheap it is. It's not in our national security interest. That's got to be decided over the next 90 days.
Yeah, I know, but where are we going to get it from? I mean, Ukraine, yes, maybe.
We got to build our own refineries.
Do we have our own refineries? We got to build them. It's going to cost. So remember, this stuff it's a reset. There's never a straight line to anything. It's necessary. I mean, here's the sort of, again, the good news here is that we actually have a president that's grappling with these issues. I mean, I was listening to Joe Biden on The View. It was the most pathetic display I've ever heard of a rationalization. I mean, the guy could barely speak. I mean, how do you have a president that can barely speak? And, can you imagine him dealing with all the stuff that Trump's dealing with right now? I mean, it's just... And then Kamala Harris was so unqualified. I mean, the American people got they traded up here. There's no doubt. Now, the question is for Trump, was it worth all the indigestion? Could he have had a summit with Xi and hashed this out without all the market going nuts? And
it depends what happens next, Charlie. Because, for example, I want to see the India deal. I want to see the Japanese deal. I want to see the EU deal. How
about the UK deal? The UK deal, if you really look at it, was pretty benign. I don't know. I looked at it and I was just trying to see where the there was. There was not much there. So the question really is, Bryan, was it all worth it? And, so that's part of the downside of Trumpism. There's a lot of, what they used to say, sound and fury. I don't want to say signifying nothing, but you just wonder at the end, was it all worth it? Could we have done this without, going nuts for 2 months?
Well, we did about 4 trade deals in these last 4 years, and now we're going to end up doing maybe a dozen at least before July 4th.
Was it worth it? I mean, did we get that much out of it?
Well, here's what Peter Mendelsohn said, the UK ambassador to the U.S.
Right.
Cut 5.
And it reflects the sort of amazing, confident relationship between our two countries and the cordial relationship personally between the President and the Prime Minister. Now we can build on it. I mean, we can look to other trade barriers that we can bring down so as to create more jobs in the United States. And also something very close to my heart, I want to see us build a close US-UK technology partnership to invest and build future industries in both our countries, which are science-based and driven by technology.
Right. So they opened up additional trade and avenues, and they create relationships, and we got to know who our friends are, and they're one of them.
I don't know. I mean, that was a lot of talk. I looked at the deal. The deal was, Bryan, I'm telling you, the deal was pretty light on details and just not, it was not, I just wondered if it was worth it when I looked at that UK deal. This is a little different. I mean, what's different about China is that if we didn't talk ourselves off the ledge of both sides, it would have been really nasty with the economy. I am telling you that businesses, and I told you about the small business, but major retailers, they went into Trump's office. They went into White House, and I'm paraphrasing here, but from what I said, they said, from what I understand from people who spoke with them, they said this: we're not going to lay off people now. We're not going to raise our prices now. We're going to eat the cost for the next couple of months. But or the next 6 to 8 weeks, basically, is what they said. If it keeps going with China, you will see layoffs. You will see massive price increases.
Right.
So remember this thing that we did there was a cost that was about to be paid, and that cost was about to start like today. That was when this stuff was starting to reach a critical stage. So we both have a very vested interest in ending this thing. Now, the question becomes, again, Brian, was it all worth it? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. But this is a UK deal. They scrapped the 20% tariff on U.S. beef, so our agriculture people are happy. The U.S. to export $5 billion in products like machine.
Do they buy that much beef from us? I don't think so. I'm just saying. They look
like a hardy group. U.S. to export $5 billion in products like machinery and ethanol.
They have a trade surplus. We have a trade surplus with them.
10% on British import remains. The UK can export 100,000 cars to the U.S. at 10% tariff instead of 25%.
You own a Jaguar?
Not yet. U.S. to eliminate levies on steel.
A Bentley? No, Bentley. You own a Bentley or a Rolls.
Listen, we got to.
This is when you start like scraping it. You're like, oh, what the hell? What is this? Well, it's not that big a deal. I'm just telling you that. Look at the fine print. It's not that much there. And the question again becomes: was it all worth it? Maybe it was. I don't know. I don't think I need to have a snap decision on this.
I'm thinking yes. But here's one thing I got to answer. I got to ask you, Charlie. Do you have a problem with the president accepting a free luxury plane from Qatar?
No, and here's why. This is like a manufactured story, in my view. I mean, and I'm telling you, I'll get hit from a lot of people with this. Friends of mine who say, "Oh, this is outrageous. They're buying the presidency." I've been covering corporate scams and conflicts of interest and quid pro quos my entire career. Here's where that gets really bad. When I have to look at campaign contribution records, which I do a lot, and study it and look at it sideways to see who gave the contribution, and then match that with the pro quo, with the quo, right, with the payoff. That's when it's not disclosed, when no one knows. No one could debate it. We know this. The president announced it. It's kind of like his crypto business that everybody's going nuts over, right? We know he's got a crypto business. If he does stuff that enriches himself, we can debate it. There could be laws passed. If the Democrats get in power, who God knows, maybe they'll impeach him again. But you understand what I'm saying. It's totally disclosed. This is what you need. You need disclosure, and you need debate. So I just don't care that he's got a plane. By the way, the guy's got his own plane, so he's got another one. I mean, I don't know. How many planes?
But he says it's
You're really going to buy Donald Trump off with a plane?
No, that's true. But I think he loves luxury. Number one, he does not like Air Force One. The new one should have been built already. He commissioned 4 years ago.
He likes luxury. Good. I'm glad we like a president that likes luxury that has good taste.
Well, and he says it's the country's, not his.
Yeah, and by the way, who cares?
Thank you. I agree with you.
Is Qatar going to buy us off? I'm telling you, I'll write about it if they get something free. Then we can, match the quid and the pro quo, right? Then we could talk about it. Mm-hmm. But right now, if it's disclosed, if we can talk about it, you're asking me the question, right? It's not like we had to find Hunter Biden's laptop to know he was doing business in a foreign country while his old man was. Remember, you had to put all that together.
I do remember.
That's where conflicts of interest get really. And I'm not saying what he did was the height of illegality. It's swampy, right? But you have to put it all together, and it wasn't disclosed. This is totally disclosed. If there's one thing about Donald Trump,
you get everything.
He discloses everything.
Yep.
Right? I mean, he's got a crypto business. Okay, he's going light on crypto regulation while he's got a crypto business. He's going to make money on that. We can write about that and talk about it, and you can ask him about it in your interview, and you hold his feet to the fire on it because it's totally disclosed. And by the way, he could get in trouble for it if it violates the law and there's a Democrat. I mean, this is how it's supposed to work.
Right.
It's not, if it's hidden, it's another story.
But real quick, do you have a view on the prescription drug executive order?
The only thing I will tell you is that we should posit that, none of this is, the medical system is hardly the height of capitalism, right? So when you start talking about, executive orders that are stopping drug prices. Remember, we're in a system where you have Obamacare. There's all these sort of irregularities that screw up market forces. Just keep that in mind. That being said, wage and price controls, the history of them have always been bad. It's always led to rationing and really bad things like less innovation. And I wouldn't have gone there, but I have to read more about this. But just so you know, Brian, when was the last time you heard wage and price controls work? Kamala Harris suggested something like this on food prices, but during the campaign, as I recall. And, the whole world laughed at her, right? It was a huge debate about how these things don't work and, why people keep prices of certain drugs high and all that sort of stuff. It's much more complicated than people just getting ripped off. But to be determined. But remember, when we're dealing with the medical system, none of this is capitalism. I would rather the president focus on, getting the economy going and then dealing with the medical system, the health system
He's got to do a
concerted way.
All right. Charlie, always great. Thanks so much. Not against the plane, but it's both sides blinked on the trade deal. He is Charlie Gasparino of Fox Business. Watch him all day.
Well, the Catholic Church has elected the first ever Pope from America. And as an American Catholic, I could not be more proud, which is a sin, and now I'm ashamed. The Vatican has selected Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, who is from the south side of Chicago, to be the new Pope. And you can tell he's from the south side because he's got his hands up. I also love that conservatives are already complaining that this Pope is too woke. How woke can a 69-year-old man from Chicago be? It's not like he came out and was like, hey, I'm Pope Leo the 14th, he, him. The reality is there are no woke Catholics. If you're a woke Catholic, you're just not Catholic anymore.
So that's pretty funny. That was SNL obviously having some fun with the new Pope. Somebody who's all over this is Jonathan Morris, a theologian. That's how we title you now. Former priest. Now you were doing a fantastic job in the coverage. I commend you as I emailed you. Tell me what it was like when you found out it was an American Pope. As much as you thought it through, were you thinking this?
I was waiting for a name that I could barely pronounce.
Right. Who you never heard of.
I'm talking to the coordinating producer right there on set, and we have 133 names. And it could have been anyone. It could have been a non-cardinal. It could have been any baptized male. Could have been the Pope. You could have been the Pope, Brian. I know that's what you were thinking.
I'm a little disappointed.
Yeah. But we had all the list of names, and they were also going to say the name in Latin. So you add names that you can't even pronounce, and then they're translating them into Latin. So I was getting ready to say, go down the list fast, tell the audience who had just been elected.
Right.
And then they came out with a guy from South Chicago.
And it was pretty amazing.
It was amazing.
Right. So what could you tell us about the process?
The process is, and on the one hand, secret, because we don't know who voted for whom, and they all take an oath of secrecy not to say anything.
Right.
On the other hand, it's extremely transparent because there's a public constitution that was drafted and updated by John Paul II, and then later updated even by Pope Francis, that it lays out exactly what's done, every single step. And it's paper ballots. Everyone has one vote. You have to have identification in order to vote. It's your cardinal outfit.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear. And it's 133. You have to get to 2/3 majority. And it's just a question of, we call it politicking or call it humanizing. You have to figure out not only who do you want, but then who do you not want. And that's how the strategy works.
The one guy you work with on the radio, Cardinal Dolan, who's got this biggest profile in America because he's got the most popular church, St. Patrick's, or most famous church, St. Patrick's. Did he play a role behind the scenes?
Well, he certainly played a role as a voter, but he also played a role that people look up to him. And I would say especially the non-Europeans, and that is a bigger block than ever before. So 133, 52 of them were European. Everybody else was either from North America, South America, Asia, Africa, or beyond. Especially the Asians and Africans have a love for for Cardinal Dolan, and they trust him. And there was a big push by the Italians, especially to get an Italian, somebody who was very aligned to Pope Francis, namely the number 2 guy, Parolin. And it seems that he probably had a lot of votes at the first and second voting, but then couldn't get beyond that. And I have no doubt, as the Italian newspapers have said very publicly, that Cardinal Dolan, as they called him, was a kingmaker.
So that's pretty amazing, but not surprising because he's so outgoing, and you know him as personally too. So I want to bring you to who the Pope is. So he grows up in Chicago. We know his brother was on Fox and Friends on Saturday. Outspoken, can't believe his little brother is Pope. So what do you think that says, the type of, how do you think, since you know President Trump and you know who this Pope is or where he's from, they're going to run across each other sooner or later, whether it's going to be intentional or unintentional. How do you think they're going to get along, being that he was critical of Trump according to his X account?
Yeah, if you want to know whether this Pope planned on being Pope, you know he didn't, because he would have deleted his Twitter account. Right? So he walked in, he left his clothes and his luggage back at the little hotel where he was staying. He did not delete his Twitter account. And yes, there were some critical things there of J.D. Vance, President Trump, the administration, but always respectful. It wasn't like a kind of sarcastic, off the cuff type comment. I think this Pope is going to be outspoken about social issues, especially having to do with war, peace, lots of things that are going to touch on what's going on in the world today, including immigration. But he is a much more intellectually rigorous Pope and intellectually rigorous communicator than Pope Francis was.
Right.
And I think President Trump, Vice President Vance have a great opportunity to actually enter into really positive dialogue. Pope Leo is going to be very respectful and very interesting.
See, Pope Francis didn't look too thrilled to meet Vice President Vance, and then he died the next day. I think it's unrelated, but I think that this could be different because although he was critical of J.D. Vance, he goes, I disagree with him on one other issue on the X account. But, I mean, do you go see the Pope or does the Pope come see you? Do you think he's going to be doing American press? Is this guy going to be out there a little bit more?
I think he will be out there. I doubt he will come to the United States right away. I think he's careful not to tell the rest of the world, I'm American. He wants to show that he truly is a universal shepherd. His linguistic skills are excellent. Perfect Italian, perfect Spanish.
Wow.
Very, very good Latin, and he speaks French as well.
Wow.
But yes, I think he will enter into the debate, and I think it will be in an interesting way, not a sarcastic way, not an off-the-cuff way. He will say, let's talk about immigration, for example. The fact that you have a right to emigrate, meaning a human right to leave one's country, it doesn't necessarily mean, this is according to church teaching, social doctrine, which he has a licentiate in, it doesn't mean that you have a right to enter into every country. And not only that, Catholic social teaching would say politicians have not only a right but an obligation to have sustainable and safe immigration.
Right.
That's according to Catholic teaching. If you get into the nuances of it. And Pope Leo XIV knows those nuances.
Well, I hope so, because he was critical of the immigration talk and the building of walls and things like that, right?
Listen, he had a Twitter account. It's not very deep.
Right.
It's truly not very deep. And yes, of course, he will be critical of President Trump's administration when he thinks that it's going against basic human rights, et cetera. But he will back it up with true dialogue and intellectual rigor.
I was kind of relieved that when it became clear that he was Pope, and an hour later everyone was looking at his social media, I'm thinking to myself, if Trump sees this, I was so afraid that he was going to hit the roof and say, what happened here? Let's vote again. Get rid of this guy. But instead, he said a bunch of nice things, right?
Yeah, it was a perfect tone. Perfect tone. He said, what an honor for this country. And it is.
Yeah.
It was always the traditional wisdom that no American could be Pope because just too much power in the hands of one country. You got the American presidency, you have the richest country in the world, and then you also have the Pope.
And we got the World Cup.
And we have the World Cup. We have Bryan Kilmeade Show.
Right.
Coming.
I mean, in the same thing. So we'll see what happens. But ultimately, do you think is he the type of guy that will decide something radical, like letting priests marry or letting women play a bigger role in the church? Does he profile that way?
I think he will make big changes for example, in common sense stuff, like that has nothing to do with the theological basis of the Catholic Church, but women in more decision-making authority, absolutely. Pope Francis began some of that, and I would agree with that. Pope Francis has put women in charge of big departments in the Vatican, and I'm glad that he has. I think Pope Leo XIV will do that as well.
All right. So where does he make his first visit? Like, he had already his first mass, right?
Yes. My guess is that anything that Pope Francis already had on the docket, and he had some pretty far-flung places scheduled, he will at least consider going.
Really?
Because they've started already all the preparations and they've done all that, so he'll at least take a look at it. Right. I doubt he'll come to the United States first, but I think he'll come to the United States soon.
So Pope Francis dies. He never went to Argentina after he was Pope. Does that show bitterness there? I don't know.
He was afraid of getting involved in Argentinian politics. I don't know exactly why he was that concerned, but typically there's been a lot of tension between the church and political forces in Argentina. It's just a very different world. Mm-hmm. And he did not want to get wrapped up in that.
What are the finances like with the church? We keep hearing the challenges of financing and the corruption that was involved. He wouldn't think to associate both, but it's a fact, right?
Yeah. The Vatican, the Curia, is still an Italian institution, Bryan, with worldwide tentacles. Nothing against Italians. I lived there for 9 years, and I never.
They're not known as great accountants.
I never go out to Irish food for dinner either. I go out to Italian. So there's amazing things in Italy, but there's a lot of forces that are not that you have to take them on. Pope Francis tried that. He brought Cardinal Pell from Australia brought him in, put him in charge of the financial systems. He got run out of town.
Really?
He got run out of town.
Because he was clamping down.
He brought in a Western Big Four accounting firm and said, open the books. And everyone said, oh, no, you don't. That's not. And
how ridiculous is that?
Yeah. So
why was that accepted?
We'll see what Pope. I'm very happy that Pope Leo XIV also spent the last 2 years inside the Vatican, working as the head of the Department of appointing bishops. He knows how the place runs, and he's an astute administrator. So yes, the Vatican is like $90 million in debt annually. That's not very much, but they have massive debts in terms of the pension obligations they have, and that means you have to get all of your properties and financial stuff in order. It could be fixed relatively soon.
All right, so you don't see him at a White Sox game. You don't think he's going to be an everyman Pope, but you do think there's an excellent chance, Jonathan Morris, that he'll be friendly with Trump.
I think he will enter into respectful dialogue with Trump.
And he's a biology major or a math major?
Mathematician, yeah. Exactly. And he's also a canon lawyer. Pope Francis kind of not made fun of, but kind of like criticized anybody who was too conservative or with the law. Or this is a canon lawyer. It's pretty ironic.
All right, Jonathan Morris, thanks so much.
It.
Fantastic job over there.
Thanks, Bryan.
A really great job. So we'll see if the president and the Pope will be friends, like Reagan and Pope John Paul II, right?
I hope they are.
All right, let's see it. The world will be a better place. Senator Markwayne Mullin, welcome back, Senator.
Hey, Bryan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I mean, the president is sky high, and he's got a reason to be. First off, from what you know about this trade deal, I can't believe how much they got done in 2 days.
Well, it actually, if you knew how much work President Trump was doing behind the scenes, you wouldn't be. Every time I spoke to him for the last 3 or 4 weeks, it seems like he was either going into a meeting with China or coming out of a meeting with China or being briefed on a meeting about China. He understood that this was of the utmost importance, and he understood that the economy would react as such. It's amazing to me that people doubt President Trump when he literally wrote the book, as you know, Bryan, The Art of the Deal. He knows exactly what he's doing. He understood that he was coming from a place of strength. It's no accident that he rolled out the UK first, because, Bryan, remember, he said he wanted the UK first in, and then immediately puts his team on a plane and flies to Geneva to negotiate, probably for most parts, a pre-negotiated deal with some face-to-face meetings that needed to take place and roll it out on Monday, knowing the markets were going to respond. Now, what's the left media going to do? Because they're not going to have anything to talk about this week.
Well, they have a lot to talk about, but they have a lot, but they could choose not to, because this is pretty impressive. And the U.S., sometimes will come out and say one thing, and the other side will say something else. For the most part, the Chinese representatives seem very positive. They said they've agreed to resolve a trade war raging between the two largest economies in the world. Scott Besson said, "I'm happy to report that we made substantial progress. The Swiss government is very kind. And now we have a situation where almost immediately, I think the real focus now is to try to get the supply chain flowing again so you don't have much of a disruption." Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think, for the most part, a lot of people had these pre-orders on hold. Visiting with when I was visiting with the CEO of the retail stores and of shipping and logistics of Amazon, he was telling me that a lot of people had a tremendous amount of supply already built in place. In fact, they saw a biggest surge of pre-supply than they did, even much more than what they'd see for Christmas. And that he at the time, he said they had about 8 weeks of supply still left, and that was only a couple of weeks ago. Right now, they had their pre-orders in place, but that's why he was saying you hadn't seen the spike in goods, which the media kept saying there was a spike, and you and I know that inflation was down by over half, and so there wasn't any spike in goods because people had pre-ordered. So what you're going to see is a backfill, and that backfill will take some time because no one had actually placed orders. So it'll take maybe a few weeks for it to start flowing. But with a 90-day pause, both economies know, especially China, knows what this does for their economy. And there's going to be some real strong negotiations done between now and then. And I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't see something come up about Panama or even what's going on in Taiwan.
Well, that's interesting. Panama, because we want to kick those companies that are running the ports over in Panama out, and the TikTok deal is supposedly back on. I'm mainly concerned, Senator, on the metals and magnets that we need for our tech and for our military. Do you have any read on that yet?
Yeah, two things have happened. There was already a supply in it. We have a resupply of some of the rare earth minerals that were already coming through. I can't get too much into it, but there was also companies across the United States that was already pre-stationed for this. Except since they had small quantities, most of the rare earth minerals wasn't being sold actually to them. When China and this dispute started going through with all the tariffs, the suppliers that had the rare earth minerals, those smaller suppliers that necessarily wasn't going from China, started flowing to the smaller companies, and so the magnets that you were seeing. In fact, there's one actually in Stillwater, Oklahoma, believe it or not, that was having a hard time getting their hands on materials, and now they're starting to get that in. So we've diversified. Even this short period of time, President Trump did it, and I know he knew what he was doing, but he made the market diversify from, instead of just going to the easiest source, now they've diversified their supply chain, which only makes us stronger and U.S. companies stronger.
Interesting. So I guess we'll see from here. Just to give you an idea of the doubts on Sunday. So prior to this deal being announced, they were focusing on the UK deal. The UK ambassador, Peter Mendelsohn, is really positive about this deal, no matter how much you press him. So I just want to play a little of the give and take. Like, he does not want to play these games. He went on with Jake Tapper, and he just pushed back every time Jake says, well, this is not big of a deal. He said, it's a huge deal. Cut 6.
My read in the British press, I'm going to pin this on the British press, is that you've accepted a worse deal than the UK had before, just to get out from the shadow of the tariff threat. Is it that you guys perhaps rushed to be first before all other countries?
I literally didn't understand the logic of that. The fact is that...
Well, you're paying more tariff than you were before, right? That's part of it.
Well, in some cases, but in other cases we're not. I mean, in some cases we're down to zero. So, and in other cases, for example, in autos, we've got absolutely secure quotas for exports to the United States. So it's a good deal, and I'm very pleased that we've achieved it, but now we have to build on it.
So he just doesn't understand it. And he said, and they tried to get him, well, you said some bad things about the president before. I said, yeah, in the past, but we're past that. We're moving forward. So it's like the media is desperate to create the old intramural fights.
They want to be divisive because if it bleeds, it leads. And you know this in the media. Nobody wants a good story, a good news story, especially if you listen to CNN or MSNBC or any other major network other than Fox. You don't want to hear positive about what's happening with President Trump and this economy. You want to show that it's all gloom and doom when it's actually a tremendous amount of good news. Well, the backstory that they're not telling about UK here is they had some issues because of the Ukraine war with some ag products. I'm trying to be as vague as possible, but some ag products. What we have done in the United States is we've secured that ag line for them. So they're not talking about that good of a deal. They're not talking about the situation that the negotiations that took place with UK was also about being reliable and resilient, and making both of our economies reliant and resilient on top of each other, meaning that we're intertwined again, and our economies are going to be even stronger because of it. It's real. It's familiar to what we look like when we came out of the war, when we needed UK to stand up really quick, but without taking advantage of us anymore. And when they have, once again, reliable supply chains, especially when it comes to ag products. And we're not trying to take business away from Ukraine, but the truth is it puts a lot of nervousness in the market, and it causes their food prices to go up. When they have a secure supply chain that can come in and backfill what they can't get out of Ukraine, it brings stability. And the UK and all of Europe's market has been very unstable since the Ukraine war.
So let's talk about Ukraine war. And it looks as though Thursday, on paper, there's going to be a face-to-face meeting between Zelensky and Vladimir Putin, even though they said, let's get a 30-day ceasefire and then set up talks. He said no. And here's what his press secretary said yesterday about the chances of this coming down. Cut 21.
President Putin is open for peace negotiations without any preconditions. And this is what he was proposing for last couple of weeks. He keeps saying that we are ready for negotiations, for direct negotiations.
But direct negotiations is different than being very close to a deal, as President Trump said. Were you close to a deal?
Yes. Well, Ukraine settlement is a very complicated thing. It is not as simple as to sign one paper, A4 size.
And you get it. But bottom line is your thoughts about how Russians are playing this. Story in the Hill today that the Russians and Iranians are coordinating to string all this out.
Well, what you're seeing is a little stability coming across the world right now. Underneath Biden, you saw a tremendous amount of destabilization because he led from a point of appeasement when it comes to foreign affairs. When you start negotiating deals with China, which was backfilling Russia, and Russia was also sustaining their market there because of the crude oil and the petroleum products they were putting on the black market to China, knowing that now the negotiating deal and a trade deal is on the table with China, that black market, it will probably have to stop. I don't know this, but I would say I guarantee you that's part of negotiations with China is like you can't take this embargoed oil and these sanctions that we put on Russia anymore. And so now Russia is saying, hold on a second, we're going to do something because we can't backfill our hoppers, our money hoppers, by going to China, so we have to negotiate a deal. And then you're seeing Iran, they're in a mess, right? After the IDF blew up everybody that they were supporting with terrorists, they have to renegotiate where they're moving from too, and it puts the president in the strength position to negotiate in China or with China taking away their black market from Russia. And so now Russia is going to have to come to the table with Ukraine. People don't understand how tied in the world is and how tied in they're to the U.S. economy and why people do business with us. And when you have a president that strength is his main focus and negotiating from strength, then you have the rest of the world that starts paying attention. Right. You create stability, and that's exactly what's happening here. So I don't know. You've got two presidents with Putin and with Zelensky that are very hard to actually trust completely. So it's hard to say because in the deal, it's their countries that they got to negotiate for. But the fact that they're willing to come to the table, now we'll see if they actually show up. But they're willing to come to the table and have a face-to-face conversation. Will tell you if that happens, then they are actually close to a deal because Russia sees their economy is going to take a huge hit if China normalizes relationships with the United States again.
And the thing is, too, Zelensky has done the right thing. I mean, he's basically helping to keep conversation going with Trump, let him know that he's there. So don't let intermediaries get in the way.
Right.
Any problem, he's told to call Trump right away, and Trump said, that's what I want. And basically, they went from a 30-day demand for a ceasefire to if Trump wants me to go on Thursday, I'm going on Thursday. So
that's right.
Let's see what happens. Senator, crazy times, and we have Eden Alexander getting out today. He's the last known American alive in Gaza.
Well, let's talk about all the Americans that the president's got that have been sitting and rotting in prison since Biden was in office, and Russia, and we're not giving away, the doctor of death to Russia to get a WNBA basketball player out. We're getting these people out because people want to do favors for the United States right now. Because once again, we're coming from a place for peace through strength, and this is what you have when you have a strong leader. I can't express that enough. President Trump has made this a strong focus, and let's not forget about Steve Witkoff, who is literally volunteering his time because he's President Trump's best friend. That has been flying back and forth to Russia and back and forth to Israel on his own dime, not taking a single penny from the government, and been negotiating all these deals. He's a real estate tycoon, really not someone you think that would be negotiating hostages release or peace deals, but he's also a negotiator like President Trump that understands the art of the deal. And this is when you have someone that President Trump put someone in that's competent to do the job, not put him in there because he's trying to fit some DEI quota.
All right. Thanks so much. Senator Markwayne Mullin, a lot of moving parts. Press conference today for the pharmaceutical announcement, and then the president at 10:45 Eastern time will be heading overseas. Busy time. Senator Markwayne Mullin, thank you.
Thank you.
And this whole talk about having a tax increase on the top 10%, Trump tweeted out that, well, George H.W. Bush did it and he broke his read my lips, no new taxes pledge. When he did that, that was to get Democratic votes because the Democrats controlled the House and Senate. The idea that the Republican Party would have a tax increase in an all-Republican bill, if you're not even doing it to get Democrats on board, is insanity.
That is Mark Thiessen yesterday on Fox News Sunday. With me right now in studio is Chairman Bryan Steil. We appreciate you being here, Bryan, from Wisconsin, but really via D.C., where you're spending almost all your time now, right?
Back and forth in Wisconsin on the weekends, in D.C. during the week.
I don't know how you do that. But a couple of things. First off, before we get into the big, beautiful bill, your reaction to what the president's talking about now, from what you understand about his Truth Social post last night, and that is the crushing of pharmaceutical costs.
A lot of details are going to come out, but here's the bottom line is I think Americans are sick and tired of people freeloading off the United States of America. That's true where our Western European allies weren't meeting their treaty obligations for NATO. It's true in the healthcare system where we see other countries, in particular Western Europe, Japan, Korea, and others, getting discounts that American hardworking families are paying for. And so finally, President Trump is standing up and saying, in America, we're not going to let other countries freeload off of us. We want to make sure that drug development continues. There's ways to do that. I want to read the details on this, but I think it's great the president's standing up and saying we're not going to let other countries freeload off the United States.
So he mentioned the pharmaceutical lobby, and RFK just said there's one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every member of Congress, and sometimes three, even including the Supreme Court. And he said the president's taking $100 million from pharmaceutical lobby, only he just doesn't do what they tell him. Do you notice, is that a strong lobby?
I think it's actually fading over time. I mean, I think it really was years ago. I've been in Congress only since 2018. I think it's a fraction of what it used to be. But that said, time is now to actually just do what's right. And that's where President Trump is so good, is he'll lean in to actually get the end result. He's not a career politician, somebody that built his life running for office. You have somebody that came in with a business background, doesn't need to be there, doesn't need the job. So he has the opportunity to really rip the Band-Aid off a lot of these policies that have been sitting around for a long time that nobody had the courage to stand up and talk about.
How do you feel about what we know about the China deal? Where tariffs dropped from 145 to 30, and for China they drop ours down from 125 to 10, and now have a mechanism now to continue to negotiate with a 90-day pause. What does that do for your job? What do you think it does for the economy? I know the market has gained roughly around 1,000 points.
I think we have a big opportunity, big picture, to get to free, fair, and reciprocal trade, meaning other people are buying American products. And the president has done a good job, in particular with our allies. We'll get to China in a second. But with our allies, as we bring those trade agreements into place, that gives us the opportunity to pivot and really address China, who is the biggest abuser of trade across the globe. And so this is more of a pause for 90 days to say, is China ready and willing to come to the table and actually stop abusing the trade agreements that were entered into and finally have a say for American workers, American farmers?
Guess we'll see what happens. But now we know this. The market seems to like that. Anyone who says on so-called Liberation Day, all that money's been gained back. And then we'll see how it goes with Japan, see how it goes with India, which I think could be next, these individual agreements and the realignment that could happen. Now, meanwhile, you guys have to focus on what you're doing. And that is making the tax cuts from 2017 permanent, as well as reinforcing defense and finding a way to save trillions of dollars. It seems, what is your biggest challenge for this?
It's going to be getting everybody to come together. It's a narrow majority in the House, but this is where we have been underestimated and overperformed time and again. To get this country back on track after 4 horrific years of the Biden administration, we need to do a couple things. We need to extend the Trump tax cuts that gave us the prosperity as we headed into the pandemic when real wages were growing, inflation was in check, and the economy was strong. We have to make sure that those are permanent. And then the other side of this is making sure that we're controlling spending. And some of this that's now coming out in legislative text where we're actually going to hold people accountable, not give a free pass for states to allow illegal immigrants to be on Medicaid programs, to actually strengthen those programs for their core and original purpose, which is to help the most vulnerable, but not to be a hammock, in particular for able-bodied childless adults.
I mean, the way I understand it, Medicaid has been totally abused, and Obamacare blew it up. 95% of it's paid by the federal government. It's supposed to be a state aid program for the poor and people for the handicapped. And now it's expanded to the point where it really can. Federal government is paying for almost what seems like universal care. No one's satisfied with the care, and no one's satisfied with the price.
The healthcare system in the United States doesn't work. And if we look at why, you're spot on that Barack Obama did a horrific job in expanding the program to areas that it wasn't originally designed for. So Medicaid, as originally designed, is for the most vulnerable, pregnant women, children, permanently disabled. And what President Barack Obama did when he expanded Medicaid is he subsidized states to expand the program to include able-bodied adults of working age. And in so doing, he actually over-subsidized that group to encourage states to take them. So the federal government, believe it or not, is actually paying more for able-bodied childless adults than they are for children and pregnant women. And so when you step back and look at this is our opportunity to actually refocus the program on its core purpose, which is to make sure that the most vulnerable amongst us are receiving health care that they deserve and need. But then to also have a check on the program, right, to say, for example, work requirements, that if you are an able-bodied childless adult of working age, at a minimum, you should be working 20 hours a week. I'd put it higher, but 20 is the number that it looks like will be in the bill. You have to be working, looking for work, volunteering. What we don't want is a program that simply subsidizes individuals that the program was not originally designed to provide for.
Well, what I understand is, too, that's one area the Republicans are afraid to say, and the president has said over and over again, we're not cutting Medicaid. So how do you message it when that is the real generator of not of the revenue, but of the debt?
Well, a ton of conservatives have fallen into the trap of talking about this in the context of how the liberals talking about it, which is the inputs into the program. How much are we spending? And forgetting that we should be looking at the outputs of the program. How well is the program working? It's the same trap conservatives fall into with education. They allow us to have a conversation about how much we're spending on education, not is the child actually learning to read, write, and do arithmetic, and actually learning how to think, not what to think. And so when we look at the Medicaid side of the program, we should be asking ourselves, is the program working? Are we in particular lifting people up and out of poverty into self-sustaining jobs? The goal should be assisting in particular able-bodied adults to be coming off of Medicaid and into private sector insurance.
Most of the states took the heroin. That said, how would you like free money from Biden and from Obama? And every Democratic state took it, and some Republican states took it. But then you have a new president that says, I shouldn't be writing these checks. Who told you that you're going to be getting all this money? So now when it comes to, well, you're going to take it away? Now you're going to be the Republican to take away that money of people that need it most. So I think it's a tough spot, but it looks like Republicans are afraid to message the way you're messaging.
I think that we have a big opportunity to improve the message, but the other is to talk about some of the reforms that are in this legislative text that's going to be voted at the committee level this week, which is let's test the program to make sure that only those who are the most vulnerable are on the program.
You're going to check it twice a month to make sure the vulnerability, that's going to be one
thing. And there's a simple provision to make sure that the people who are on the Medicaid program are alive. We're not even cross-checking that against what's called the Social Security Death Database, the master list of whether or not Americans are alive or dead. We should be means testing this. I'll give you an extreme example. In the state of California, they don't means test, meaning how wealthy is the individual before they get on Medicaid. So an individual,
how could that be?
They got a waiver in past years, and this is our chance to go back and reform the program to force it. So someone that is a multi-million-dollar lottery winner is not on Medicaid being subsidized by the federal government. These are the extreme examples that exist under the current rules because we're not enforcing the program to make sure that it's actually there for the most vulnerable, but not there for individuals that it's not needed for.
So I guess that's got to be the other thing would be the SALT tax, being able to write off state and local taxes. Mike Lawler's on and says before you say, yeah, we have high taxes, but New York and California do pay the most to the federal government from revenue that they generated. So what is the number that you think the so-called SALT caucus will demand?
Well,
right now they're $10,000.
Yeah, all of this is going to roll out today. You have two things at play, the current number being $10,000. And if no action is taken on taxes, that deduction goes all the way back up at the end of the year. I'm of the belief that we shouldn't be subsidizing states with high state and local taxes. That's my broader view. I'd like the $10,000 cap, or I'd bring it down. So I'm opposite some of these guys. Wisconsin's is way too much. But all of these states should be forced to look at the efficiency of their local programs. You can go to a lot of states and say, how many different folks do you need at the municipal level making big bucks? We got to force the states to make those tough decisions. That said, I think we're going to see this number come out later this week. It'll probably be an increase in the SALT cap number. I think that's probably on the table. But the biggest piece of this tax reform bill is going to be making sure the tax cuts that were in place and the reforms in place from 2017 in the original go-around are there again. And that's things like accelerated depreciation.
Are they there again, or are they permanent?
They both. We'll see that. We'll see the text later today.
Can you explain that for the layman? Because I understand if you don't cut a certain amount of spending, reconciliation doesn't work, and therefore they just become tax cuts that a Democratic president could just undo.
Yeah, this is all accounting gimmicks that would make any normal person's head explode. And so what we need to do is make them permanent. And so what the gamesmanship that is played is if you look over the course of 10 years and you say, we're going to save $10 a year, 10 years, you should save $100. But they say, aha, we'll sunset it after 5 years. So what does it cost? $50. It doesn't cost $100. It's gamesmanship. It's like pretending your child's only going to college in the first year, but not going to college in year 2, 3, and 4. Right. And so on paper, you pretend as if you don't have a cost or a savings. If we put these in and make them permanent, then people can actually make business decisions to invest in their jobs and in jobs and across the United States of America in a permanent mindset. And so making these reforms permanent so we're not back here where we are today in another 9 or 10 years is going to be essential.
Right. I think that's important too, because I think a lot of people assume when Republicans got the House, Senate, and the presidency, these tax cuts are going to be permanent. And that's how they invested. So if you guys can't get this done, if House can't deliver by Memorial Day and the Senate by the 4th of July, how long then, and people start getting worried, the market's going to react to that. How long do you think, let's say you guys do you think you'll get your deal done by Memorial Day?
We're going to know a lot more by the end of the week, but I think we're in a position to do that.
Are you going to work right to the 23rd?
I don't think we should go home. I think we should just work until this is done. I think this is so absolutely essential for the American people that nobody should break until we're done.
And then how hard is it going to be in reconciliation? Because it doesn't seem like the the cuts are the same on the Senate side.
Well, at the end of the day, those are going to have to be merged into one final bill. This is all a bunch of gobbledygook to get around the 60-vote threshold in the Senate. All of this is parliamentary procedural maneuvering to get to a 50-vote threshold in the Senate. But at the end of the day, I think this will come together. The negotiations are ongoing. The American people are starting to see more and more the reforms we can make to get this country back on track. And as President Trump starts to lean in support of key provisions, I think we have a huge opportunity to finalize the deal.
Story in the Axios today says he's obsessed with the midterms already. And where last time he was looking for people that thought a lot like him, he's only looking for people that can win. And he's looking to clear out any primary opponents for anybody. That's why he called up Chris Sununu, even though they had some problems, even though we know that was happening with Governor Brian Kemp. He said, I want you to run for Senate. Neither did, but they want to work with him and their machines to pass. Have you noticed him focusing on the midterms?
I see less maybe on the midterms, but I think Trump 2.0 is really pragmatic on making sure that he has support in the House and in the Senate. And I think what we saw is in the first Trump term, he started off with Republicans, and then the House flipped to Democrats, and we saw the train come to a halt. Not only
litigation flying.
Exactly. Whether that's the Dems game, right? Throw every wrench in the wheels and the cogs of progress to try to score a political point. And so what we can't do is allow the Democrats to come back and take the House this upcoming cycle. And so I think it's correct to focus in a sense, on the midterms. But the way you really deliver in the midterms is to deliver on the policy front. Yeah. And so we can go back and talk about the secure border. And if we combine the border with getting reconciliation done and getting this economy humming again, where American families can start to afford the things that they need, that's the selling point that allows you to go into the midterm and say, we showed you what we can do. We need 2 more years to finish the job.
Understood. Congressman Bryan Steil, great to see you, Chairman, I should say. Best of luck in your sprint to Memorial Day.
Thanks for having me in.